Gaura Hari Bol.
Jaya Om Vishnu Para Paramahamsa Parivajakacharya Ashtotara Satashishi Mar A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Om Vishnu Para Paramahamsa Parivajakacharya Ashtotara Satashishi Mar Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Iskcon founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Rinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai. Yamuna Maya Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Rinda Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Pramanandi Hari Hari Bo. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare I need the fifth canto. I need the fifth canto. Oh. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Guru Deva, Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Astotara Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Maharaj Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Namom Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Tamal Krishna Goswami Namine Namom Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. So today the new semester for Krishna House begins. So we are starting a new canto, which is Canto 5, and we'll start with Chapter 1 today. From this section of the Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada has started to give summaries at the beginning of the chapter. So since the summary is really succinct, I thought we will read the summary and comment as we go along. And the verse we are going to do later will be verse 5. We're doing Chapter 1 today. The chapter is entitled The Activities of Maharaj Priyavrata. When the Bhagavatam is described, it is described that the cantos 1 and 2 are the lotus feet of Krishna. 3 and 4 are the thighs of Krishna. And this canto 5 is described as the lotus navel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it has two different activities. One is Visarga, the sub-creation, and the second part is geography, how the universe is structured. So the first half continues with the activities of Swayambhuva Manu. So we said that Swayambhuva Manu was given the service of populating the universe. And his wife was Satarupa. And they had 5 children. And Hanumat Prashaka Swami has an acronym for that, right? You remember what that is? Oh, nobody said this? It's called DAP UP. He had 3 daughters and 2 sons. So Devahuti, Akuti and Prasuti, the 3 daughters. And then 2 sons, Uttanapad and Priyavrata. So in the last chapter we read about Uttanapad, whose son was Rupa Maharaj. So that finished Uttanapad's dynasty. And now we are going to read about the activities of Maharaj Priyavrata, the other son of Swayambhuva Manu. So that's where we are at, just to give you kind of like a background. So we'll read the chapter summary. So someone can start reading the first paragraph, if you are there. Is it there on your weather base? Okay. I can start reading while you find that. This chapter describes how King Priyavrata enjoyed royal opulence and majesty and then returned to full knowledge. King Priyavrata was detached from worldly opulences and then he became attached to his kingdom. But finally, he again became detached from material enjoyment and thus achieved liberation. When King Parikshit heard about this, he was struck with wonder, but he was somewhat bewildered as to how a devotee with no attachment for material enjoyment could later become attached to it. Thus, in astonishment, he questioned Sukadev Goswami about it. So, this chapter begins with Priyavrata Maharaj. He got training from Narad Muni, and he was pursuing his spiritual activities as a brahmachari. But then, because his father had given him the service of wanting to populate the earth and to become the king, he was asked to get married. So he got married, and then here is the astonishment of Parikshit Maharaj. He's asking, how is it that someone who was trained in austerity and in curtailing sense gratification in brahmacharya, how is it that he became attached, he thinks he's attached to material life by becoming a king? You know, becoming a king is like the highest of all material opulences we can think of, right? There's full license for sense gratification. And then later, but it is described that Maharaj Priyavrata later gave up his kingly duties and became renounced again. So he was, Parikshit Maharaj was very astonished. How come he went through this cycle? So this is his question. So next paragraph, someone can read that one in response. Yeah.
In response to the king's inquiries, Sukadev Goswami said that devotional service, being transcendental, cannot be deviated by any material influences. Priyavrata had received transcendental knowledge from the instructions of Narada, and therefore he did not want to enter a materialistic life of enjoyment in a kingdom. He accepted the kingdom, however, at the request of such superior demigods as Lord Brahma and Lord Indra, the king of heaven.
We can stop there for a minute. So, Sukadev Goswami then responds to Parikshit Maharaj's question that Priyavrata did not really want to become a king and become entangled. He knew that very well, but because he was given this instruction by his superiors, specifically by Lord Brahma, who is his grandfather, and Lord Indra, the king of heaven. So Priyavrata is an example of someone who follows the instructions of his superiors. And because he was given that instruction, although he initially refused, when Brahma tried to convince him along with Indra, then he accepted this service of having a wife and being responsible for a whole kingdom. Actually, he was responsible for the whole earth at that point. Okay, the next paragraph.
Everything is under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Controller, and everyone must work accordingly. Just as a bull is controlled by a rope tied to its nose, so all conditioned souls are forced to work under the spells of the modes of nature. A civilized man, therefore, works according to the institution of Varna and Ashram. Even in materialistic life, however, no one is free to act. Everyone is compelled to accept a certain type of body offered by the Supreme Lord, and thus be allotted different grades of happiness and distress. Therefore, even if one artificially leaves home and goes to the forest, he again becomes attached to materialistic life. Family life is compared to a fortress for practicing sense control. When the senses are controlled, one may live either at home or in the forest. There is no difference.
So then Sukadeva Goswami describes how every living entity is forced to act according to the modes of material nature, just like a bull is controlled by a rope through his nose. So similarly, we are working or we are controlled by the modes of material nature. But even in materialistic life, if someone takes shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can easily get out. And usually we hear this very often, right? The householder life is described as being a deep, dark well, like Griham Andhakupam, deep, dark well. But here's another one which we don't hear so well. It's that family life is a fortress for practicing sense control. This is the positive side of family life, you know? That one has, it's like a fortress, it's very protected for one to gratify his senses under regulation, and therefore purify his senses and his consciousness, and then continue in devotional service. So this is one that usually we don't hear so much about. And then Srila Prabhupada describes when the senses are controlled, we can live either at home or in the forest, there is no difference. So Priyavrata Maharaja could be a brahmachari engaged in austerities, or he could be a king ruling an entire kingdom with so much opulence. But because his senses were controlled and he was under the shelter of the Lord, he was still progressing in his devotional service. And then the last paragraph. There are a lot of names there, but you can go on. Yeah. Gandiva.
When Maharaj Priyavrata, following the instruction of Lord Brahma, accepted the royal throne, his father, Manu, left home for the forest. Maharaj Priyavrata then married
Barhishmati,
the daughter of Vishvakarma.
Okay, we're going. You can just pause for a minute, because they are like, he had 10 sons from this first wife, and of the 10 sons, 7 of them became grihastas, and Priyavrata Maharaj gave them charge of each of the 7 islands when he divided the world into 7 islands. And then 3 of them became sannyasis. And then in his other wife, he begot 3 sons. So the names are given. So you can read here, Maharaj, the last line. Maharaj Priyavrata also had a second wife, in whom he begot 3 sons, and the names are given. The last line you can read, Gandiva. All of them, can you get that? Even below, it may be easy for me to read it. All of them were elevated to the post of Manu, the 3 sons from the second wife. Sukadeva Goswami thus described how Maharaj Priyavrata achieved liberation. So now we will skip to text 5 is the verse, and this is a prose verse. So we'll do the words, and then I'll just read it one time. We'll do it together. Shri Sukha Vacha. We'll just do the word for word. Badham, tam, no, it's uktam. Uktam, bhagavata, uttama shlokasya, Srimad Charana Ravinda, Makaranda, Rase, Aveshita, Chetasa, Bhagavata, Paramahamsa, Dayita, Katham, Kinchit, Antaraya, Vihatam, Swam, Shivatamam, Padavim, Na, Prayena, Hinvati. Shri Shukha Uvacha. Badam uktvam bhagavata uttama shlokasya Srimad Charana Ravinda Makaranda Rasa Aveshita Chetaso Bhagavata Paramahamsa Daita Katham Kinchid Antaraya Vihatam Swam Shivatamam Padavim Na Prayena Hinvati. Someone can read the translation.
Sri Shukadev Goswami said, "What you have said is correct. The glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is praised in eloquent transcendental verses by such exalted personalities as Brahma, are very pleasing to great devotees and liberated persons. One who is attached to the nectarian honey of the Lord's lotus feet, and whose mind is always absorbed in his glories, may sometimes be checked by some impediment, but he still never gives up the exalted position he has acquired."
So we will read the purport, the first paragraph. You want to read?
Sri Sukadev Goswami accepted both of the king's propositions, that a person who is advanced in Krishna consciousness cannot embrace materialistic life again, and that one who has embraced materialistic life cannot take up Krishna consciousness at any stage of his existence. Although accepting both these statements, Shukadev Goswami qualified them by saying that a person who has once absorbed his mind in the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead may sometimes be influenced by impediments, but he still does not give up his exalted devotional position.
Okay. So the beginning of this chapter, Parikshit Maharaj is questioning, or he's puzzled, and he's asking Sukadev Goswami that someone who is advanced in Krishna consciousness cannot take up materialistic life. And at the same time, someone who is very materialistic cannot take up Krishna consciousness at any point. So he's confused. How does this happen? In this, citing the example of Priyavrata Maharaja. So Sukadev Goswami then he says that someone who is attached to the lotus feet of Krishna, that Srimad Charanara Vinda, the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord are so beautiful, and what comes from the lotus feet of the Lord is Makaranda Rasa Aveshita, someone who is absorbed in the honey like nectar which is coming from the lotus feet of the Lord. He cannot be deviated from devotional service. So it looks like there may be some impediments, but he never gives up his exalted position. Shivatamam Padavim is what is given. Shivatamam means most exalted or very auspicious position. So when a devotee takes up devotional service, his position becomes very exalted. And once he has come to this platform, he never gives it up, although there may be some impediments. And Srila Prabhupada is going to tell us how this happens. So this is the first premise Sukadev Goswami is making, that anyone who takes up devotional service, he never gives up his exalted position, even though impediments may come. So how is that? We can read the next paragraph. Gandiva, is it you? Okay.
According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, there are two kinds of impediments to devotional service. The first is an offense at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava. This is called Vaishnava Aparada. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu warned his devotees not to commit Vaishnava Aparada, which he described as the mad elephant offense. When a mad elephant enters a beautiful garden, it destroys everything, leaving a barren field. Similarly, the power of Vaishnava Aparada is so great that even an advanced devotee becomes almost devoid of his spiritual assets if he commits it. Since Krishna consciousness is eternal, it cannot be destroyed altogether, but advancement may be checked for the time being. Thus, Vaishnava Aparada is one kind of impediment to devotional service. Sometimes, however, the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotee desires to impede one's devotional service. For example, Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha were formerly Jaya and Vijay, the gatekeepers in Vaikuntha. But by the desire of the Lord, they became his enemies for 3 lives. Thus, the desire of the Lord is another kind of impediment. But in both cases, the pure devotee, once advanced in Krishna consciousness, cannot be lost. Following the orders of his superiors, Swayambhuva and Lord Brahma, Priyavrata accepted family life, but this did not mean he lost his position in devotional service. Krishna consciousness is perfect and eternal, and therefore it cannot be lost under any circumstances. Because the material world is full of obstructions to advancement in Krishna consciousness, there may appear to be many impediments, yet Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, describes in Bhagavad Gita, Kuntaya Prati Janihi No Me Bhakta Pranashanti. Once one has taken shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord, he cannot be lost.
We can wait, we can take a pause here. So how does this happen? That there can be impediments in the devotional strategy of a person. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that there are two causes. The first cause is offenses to the Vaishnavas, and the second cause is by the desire of the Lord. So there are two reasons someone's devotional service may face some obstacle. So he first describes as Vaishnava Aparad, and we all know Vaishnava Aparad is compared to the mad elephant. And here Srila Prabhupada gives that example, right? The kripa of devotional service is called the Bhakti Lata. It's like a plant which grows towards, it pierces all the coverings of the universe and takes shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord, where this kripa gives fruit in the form of love of God. This is the analogy that is used. And to grow a plant, we need what? Sunshine, right? And we need water. So what is described in this analogy? What is the water and what is the sunshine in our devotional service for the Bhakti Lata Beach?
Hearing and chanting is watering?
Yes. And the sunshine is the association of the devotees. Yes, very good. And then we have to fence this kripa, right? When you have a garden, like we have the gardens, sometimes we put a fence, right? And so that offenses, like, other animals cannot enter, which may eat up the kripa. So similarly, and then we have the garden, the kripa is growing, we have to pull out the weeds. So the weeds are the anarthas, the unwanted things which grow. So we, just as we have to recognize what is a weed and what is the real kripa, we have to recognize what is the actual plant, the Bhakti Lata kripa, and what are the weeds. The weeds may be the side effects which may come, like, prestige, reputation, so much material facility, sense gratification. And then the unwanted things which come in, we have to pull out these weeds of pride and possessiveness, controlling like this. And then, but if an elephant comes in, it will destroy everything. So if we commit an offense to the lotus feet of the devotees, that will destroy everything. So we know that offenses to the lotus feet of the devotees is more dangerous than offenses to the feet of the Lord. The Lord takes it very seriously. So can we think of some examples where there was an offense where someone committed offenses? The Bhagavatam is full of these examples, right? So let's see if we can remember some of the pastimes where we can remember where someone committed an offense, either knowingly or unknowingly, where someone created an offense to the devotees.
Well, we just read about Lord Shiva.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who was the person who committed the offense?
Daksha.
Daksha. Yes, Daksha committed an offense towards Lord Shiva, not recognizing that he was such an exalted person. And what was the consequence? What happened to him?
What happened to
Daksha, because he committed the offense to Lord Shiva.
I don't know. I wasn't attentive.
Yeah, we didn't finish the whole, of course. So they broke out some disagreement and physical violence, right? He lost his head. His head was cut off. And then how did he rectify it? How do we rectify the offense to a devotee? What is the process? How do we do?
We beg for forgiveness.
We beg for forgiveness. So that's the only way. So here in that particular pastime, we see then Lord Shiva, Daksha approached Lord Shiva and he apologized to him. That, I committed an offense not recognizing your exalted position, so please forgive me. And the Vaishnava who is offended, being very merciful, he immediately forgave him. And therefore Daksha regained his fortune, right? So that's a very good example. What other examples can we think of? Yes, Sadhu Prabhu.
Well, the example is given here is the Jai and Vijay.
Perfect, yes.
They offended the 4 Kumaras who were coming to see Vishnu.
Yes.
And they stopped them. And they said, who are you stopping anybody? We're in Vaikuntha. How
That's right.
did we get here?
Yes.
So it was an offense.
Yes. So you gave a very nice example also of the four Kumaras who were offended by Jay and Vijay. Now that an example, the Acharyas say that is an example of something which was the desire of the Lord. It was not that they had committed Vaishnava aparad of their own volition, but it was the desire of the Lord to show an example of how one should be very careful about one's position and not become proud, and be not just judged from the externals. Because like you said, the four Kumaras, when they came, they were like little children, right? They did not even have clothes on. So Jay and Vijay, acting in their position, they thought, hey, wait a minute, you can't go to seek the Supreme Lord like this. So they spoke harsh, they put out they blocked the doorway, right? The four Kumaras went through 6 gates, and in the 7th gate, these doorkeepers were there. And then the four Kumaras, we know that they were Paramatmavadis, right? They were so exalted. So how come they lost it, right? They became angry. So one may wonder, how did they become so angry and give such a curse? They cursed them that you are not fit to be here in Vaikuntha. So you should fall down from this position. We'll come to that in just a minute. What other examples can we think of offenses to the Vaishnavas? Durvasa Muni is a very good example. Yes, he offended Ambarish Maharaj, and Ambarish Maharaj had to travel looking for a solution for 1 whole year. So we see offenses to the Vaishnavas can impede our devotional service for a long period of time. And the solution finally was that he went all the way to Vaikuntha, right, and told the Lord, please, this Sudarshan is running after me. You released him, so please, save me. And what was Narayan's response? He said, I cannot save you. You have to go back to Ambarish Maharaj who you offended. So he had to go all the way back to Ambarish Maharaj and beg forgiveness. And of course, Ambarish Maharaj did not take offense. So once he forgave him, then the Lord Vishnu retracted the Sudarshan Chakra. Okay. Some other examples? We said Daksha. In this 5th canto is the example of Maharaj Rahuguna. Rahugana was a king, and he was being carried in a palanquin, and they were looking for one more person to carry the palanquin, and they found this stout-looking, person on the street. They kind of engaged him, but Jad Bharat was a very exalted devotee, and he was acting like an imbecile. And so, because he was in such exalted consciousness, when he was carrying the palanquin, he was looking to see if there were ants, he would stop, or he would move not in sync with the other palanquin carriers. So the king, Rahuguna, had a very jerky ride, and he was very upset. So then he spoke very cruel words, it's described, to Jad Bharat, and started to blaspheme him. And at that point, Jad Bharat revealed his true character and began to preach to King Rahuguna. And then, soon as Rahuguna realized that this is actually an exalted person, I should be serving him. So he immediately got off the palanquin, apologized, and then asked Jad Bharat to enlighten him. So he also apologized, and therefore he mitigated his offense. Madhakalpataru had another example.
Well, I'm not sure that once, Kaliya offended Garuda. Is that one? That, he was, because Garuda is supposed to take fish.
Yes.
And then I think Kaliya, yeah. The other one I was thinking, Indra offended Brahaspati.
Yes, thinking of his position. And therefore the demigods were put into difficulty. Yes. What about in Chaitanya Lila? Some examples? Ramachandra Khan offending Haridas Thakur and sending the prostitute to bewilder him. Then we have the example, I was thinking of Sobari Muni. He also, Garuda was going to eat some fish, and Sobari Muni thought, oh, these fish have no shelter, so he gave them shelter, not thinking that they were food for Garuda, and Garuda got upset, and therefore when Saubhari Muni was doing his austerity underwater, his meditation broke. Although he was such an exalted mystic, he had done so much austerity underwater, but because he offended Garuda, he lost that, and ultimately he gave up his practice, and he got married, right, and enjoyed sense gratification. So these are some of the examples. And then the other famous example we have is Rupa Goswami. He did not actually commit an offense, but he was in his meditation, he saw some humorous pastime between the divine couple, and he just laughed out aloud. And there was this lame Brahman who was walking through. So he thought, oh, Rupa Goswami is laughing because I have this bodily defect and I'm limping. So he took offense, and immediately Rupa Goswami's meditation broke. So, and he looked around, there was no one. So he thought, I have definitely offended someone, that's why my meditation is broken. And so he was wondering, how do I find out? So he consulted his older brother, Sanatan Goswami. And Sanatan Goswami told him the remedy, that you make a feast and invite everyone in Raj. And whoever doesn't come, you'll know who is the person you offended. So Rupa Goswami followed that instruction. And at the feast, this Brahman didn't come. So then he approached this Brahman and asked that, for forgiveness, that I'm not even aware how I offended you. And the Brahman then described what had happened. And then Rupa Goswami said, he explained the situation, and the Brahman was appeased. In the example we see of, there's an example in Mother Jamuna's biography, or actually, I don't know if it's in the biography, I haven't read that far. But one time, Brahmatirtha Prabhu relates this, that Mother Jamuna, one time when she saw Tamal Krishna Maharaj, she said that you were so mean to me when Srila Prabhupada was, building Vrindavan Mayapur, that you were so mean. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj's response was, I had so many responsibilities for Srila Prabhupada that I don't even remember what I did, how many offenses I may have done. So you please forgive me. And just by his words, Jamuna was appeased. And immediately everything was forgotten. Similarly, we see Srila Prabhupada on his final pastimes, when he was leaving his body, when his godbrothers came to visit him, Srila Prabhupada was so humble. Some of his godbrothers were inimical towards him. They did not assist him in his mission. They also criticized him. They also tried to recruit his disciples. And Srila Prabhupada was fiery sometimes in his response to this type of impediments. But towards the end of his life, when his godbrothers came, he apologized. He said that during my service, I have said so many unpleasant things, or I may have been very harsh. So you please forgive me. Jai Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhava ki jai, Giriraj Maharaj ki jai, Radha Giridhari ki jai, Nitai Chaitanya Chandra Nitai Gaur Chandra ki jai. So these are some of the examples of offenses, Vaishnava aparad. Then they are aparad by the desire of the Lord. And Sadhu Sangha Prabhu gave this example here of Jay and Vijay. The Lord had a desire to enjoy fighting, Viryaras. He wanted to fight. But the Lord doesn't fight with any ordinary Joe, right? He has to have someone from the spiritual world he fights with. He doesn't ever contact anything material. So, not to mean anything to you, Joe. So, you're not an ordinary Joe. You're definitely transcendental in this place. So, he was wanting to find a suitable match. So therefore he engineered this whole pastime where the two doorkeepers, very stout, individuals, they were cursed by the four Kumaras to take birth in this material world. And they were very inimical to the Lord. And therefore the Lord enjoyed this pastime of fighting with his devotees. And here we see this other example of Priyavrata Maharaja. He was engaged in devotional service, but the world had to be populated, right? The living entities had to have bodies so they can continue with their karma. So then Brahma and Swayambhuva Manu, they intervened. It was the desire of the Lord that Priyavrata become a householder and populate the earth and become a king, flatten the earth, make the 7 islands so that Bharatvarsha could be ruled. So this is another example, Priyavrata Maharaja's example. And it is also described the example of Bharat Maharaj himself. Maharaj Bharat, we know he was also a king. He left all of that and he went to the forest and he was performing his bhakti. And what happened? A deer comes along, right? And because he's a Kshatriya, by his nature he has to give protection. So he just rescued the deer, but he didn't leave it at that. He continued to care for the deer, and as he was taking care of the deer, he became so attached to the deer that he could not think of anything else but the deer. He was thinking like, did the deer eat? Is he well protected? Who is taking care of him? Is he safe? He doesn't have the skills to survive on his own. So his meditation became the deer. And in this meditation, he gave up his life. But because he had done his devotional service so well, in the life of a deer, he still had remembrance of his previous life. So as a deer, he hung out in the ashrams of sages. And when he left that deer body, he again got a human birth in the family of Brahmins. And in that birth also he remembered, so he refused to engage in social affairs. So he acted like he was dumb and deaf. And so his family and society considered him to be a useless person or not intelligent. And therefore he avoided attachment. So the example that the Lord wanted to teach through the example of Bharat Maharaj is the problem we may have if we get attached to material things. Or even if one is engaged in spiritual life, this attachment may be so strong that we will give up our spiritual activities or get deviated from the path. So these are the obstacles which may come. But then Srila Prabhupada he says that the Krishna consciousness is eternal and it cannot be destroyed altogether, but advancement may be checked for the time being. So when we commit these offenses, it's not that the devotional service is lost, it is checked. Sometimes we give this example that when we do devotional service, we are making deposits in our bank account, right? But sometimes because of offenses, the account is frozen. So it's not lost, but it's frozen. So you cannot actually access our devotional credits. And we become as if we are miserly, So then as we continue in our devotional service, then once that account finally will become unfrozen and we can access it. So in this sense, Srila Prabhupada gives us that under no circumstances can devotional service be stopped. It's only the obstacles are like you're freezing your account and we can again access it. And then he ends with saying that from the Bhagavad Gita that anyone who takes to devotional service, he can never be vanquished. So we will read the next paragraph. In this verse, the word Shivatamam is there. Someone? Any other readers? Someone? Oh. Yeah, you can read, Prabhu. Yeah.
In this verse, the word Shivatamam is very significant. Shivatamam means the most auspicious. The devotional path is so auspicious that a devotee cannot be lost under any circumstances. This is described in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita by the Lord himself. Partha naiveha namutra vinashas tasya vidyate. My dear Arjuna, for a devotee there is no question of being lost, either in this life or in the next. Bhagavad Gita 6.40. In Bhagavad Gita 6.43, the Lord clearly explains how this is so. Tatra tam buddhi samyogam labhate purvadehikam yatate cha tato bhuya sangsidhau kurunandana. By the order of the Lord, a perfect devotee sometimes comes to this material world like an ordinary human being. Because of his previous practice, such a perfect devotee naturally becomes attached to devotional service, apparently without cause. Despite all kinds of impediments due to surrounding circumstances, he automatically perseveres in devotional service and gradually advances until he once again becomes perfect. Bilvamangala Thakur had been an advanced devotee in his previous life, but in his next life he became greatly fallen and was attached to a prostitute. Suddenly, however, his entire behavior was changed by the words of the very prostitute who had so much attracted him, and he became a great devotee. In the lives of exalted devotees, there are many such instances, proving that once one has taken to the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, he cannot be lost. Kaunteya prati janihi name bhakta pranashyati.
I think you can finish off reading because we don't have much time. That way we'll cover the purport.
The fact is, however, that one becomes a devotee when he is completely freed from all reactions to sinful life. As Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita 7.28, Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam punya karmanam tedvandva mohanir mukta bhajante mam dridha vrataha. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, and who are freed from the duality of illusion, engage themselves in my service with determination. On the other hand, as Prahlad Maharaj said, Matirna Krishne Paratas Vatova Mito Bibhadyeta Griha Vratanam. A person who is too attached to materialistic family life, home, family, wife, children, and so on, cannot develop Krishna consciousness. These apparent contradictions are resolved in the life of a devotee by the grace of the Supreme Lord, and therefore a devotee is never bereft of his position on the path of liberation, which is described in this verse as Shiva Tamam Padavim.
Thank you. So beautiful here that this question was also raised in chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna was asking that if someone takes to devotional service and he doesn't complete the process, or for some reason it is stopped, then what is his position? Is he like a riven cloud that he lost on the material side because he gave it up, but he didn't perfect his Krishna consciousness, so therefore he does not get to the supreme destination? So does he just get like lost? And Krishna says, and these are the verses cited from that same 6th chapter, that he says, for a devotee there is no question of being lost either in this life or the next. So Krishna says, if someone stops or his devotional life is impeded, there is an obstacle after a short period of time, his destination is that he gets birth in a family of Brahmins or in a family, in an aristocratic family, so he can continue in that life. And if someone after a long period of practice falls down, then he is born in a family of learned transcendentalists. And here Srila Prabhupada gives the example of himself and his spiritual master, that they were born in a family of transcendentalists so they could progress in their spiritual life. Of course, and then Srila Prabhupada gives the example that sometimes a perfect devotee comes to the world by the order of the Lord. We can think of the example of Srila Prabhupada, and they have so many impediments, Even though Srila Prabhupada wanted to take up spiritual life after he saw his spiritual master, but we see there may be apparent obstacles, right? He was attracted to Gandhi's movement. He did not have a proclivity to associate with sadhus because he saw so many bad examples in his own life. And then when he wanted to take up spiritual life, his own wife sold his Bhagavatams for tea biscuits, and she would not cooperate with his program. Then he finally takes up makes the step to take initiation, and he understands the mission of his guru, and his godbrothers don't cooperate with him. He tried to translate the literature into English, and he would go to Delhi to publish the books, and he was gored by a bull. He would walk from person to person in tea stalls. There were no takers, right? But he persisted, and it looked like like this was a lost cause. He tries to go to the West, he has to beg for a passage to India, and on the way, then he has 2 heart attacks. Like then he comes here, there's no facility, he doesn't know to look right or left, where to go. Then he ends up in that ashram of Dr. Mishra, who is a Mayavadi, who does not allow him to speak. Then he lives in the Bowery, and his roommate becomes insane and tries to attack him. So he has to leave that place where he's staying, no shelter, go begging for another place to stay. And then he has to work with, people who are so far removed from the saints he knew in Vrindavan. He's cooking for them, cleaning, his life was in danger, it has no help. And then he asks his godbrothers for help, just send me some dhotis or mridangas. And no response, right? Then so after he establishes it here, then he goes back to India, and he's criticized because his disciples are not trained in Vaishnava etiquette. And he's criticized because he gives facility for women. So many obstacles he has. But what a glorious example for all of us, that how Srila Prabhupada persevered. So it's an example of someone who came to this world, and the example of so many obstacles are given just to show the example of a devotee who never deviates from the purpose of the Lord. So although Srila Prabhupada does not give his example, we can see his life is an example of someone who has obstacles because of the desire of the Lord. So this devotional service continues, and the devotee who takes up this auspicious position, Shiva Tamam Padavim, it's never lost. It may be frozen, there may be obstacles, but just like the river always flows to the ocean, there may be boulders, there may be mountains, but the river always finds a way to the ocean. So similarly, once we take up devotional service, we can be assured that we will get to the goal by the mercy of the devotees and by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So you have questions? Yeah, I'll stop here.
I was thinking, oftentimes people hear these things about offenses and then how it causes problems in your life, freezing the assets, so to speak. What I really liked about what was said in here is that people might wonder, well, how if I'm unaware? Maybe I don't know I committed offense, and then I'm not even struggling in spiritual life, that I'm doing the right thing. One doesn't know necessarily. You could be so oblivious that you commit an offense, you go away, and you still think you're fine. But so then one might think, well, then how is that person going to be saved? But these examples, a lot of the examples are that the position is not lost, and Krishna makes an arrangement that it's reinvigorated, like with the example of Bilvamangala Thakur. He was exalted in his previous life, he became attached to this prostitute, and by her very words, yes, it reawakened his inspiration somehow. So one doesn't have to be, therefore one can take to devotional service, and even if one's blindfolded, you can run and you won't fall down, right? It's such a powerful process because Krishna personally takes charge of that individual's life and is arranging things for the elevation of the individual.
Yes, very nice share. That Krishna individually takes charge of our spiritual lives. As long as we avoid the offenses and we don't willingly commit, then Krishna takes charge of us. Yeah, so it's not lost. Thank you for that sharing. Purnamrita Hida.
So on that topic, is it that, when we are engaged in devotional service and we're chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna takes care of our karma. But when we stop chanting Hare Krishna, is that he's no longer in control?
So there is 2 things, right? There is free will, and then there is the destiny of free will. So when we exercise our free will and we want to move away from Krishna, right? We have exercised our free will because we have the ability to choose, either we chant or we don't chant. So for any reason, if we decide that we want to stop to chant, then we have exercised our free will. And in this case, the free will is not congruent with the will of Krishna. Because obviously Krishna wants us to come back to him. right? So we cannot blame Krishna. We have to take responsibility for ourselves. Sadhu, you had a
I was thinking, very right, I was agreeing. And I was also thinking that I'm a devotee because they practice devotional service. You get some taste.
Yes.
One never forgets that. So even if you choose, I'm going to go away from Krishna, you'll never find that same taste anywhere else. So this will also drive you back to Krishna. You at some point will naturally choose Krishna also, because no one can go on suffering needlessly forever. As soon as you've done some devotional service, it's simply a matter of time. You go back to Godhead for all of these different reasons we're discussing.
Yes, so right. Now, once you choose Krishna, then you never have the same taste for material life. Never. It just goes away. We have this example of a devotee who was a pujari for the deities, and somehow he left. And then what kind of job he got? He was dressing mannequins in a department store. So he's doing the same thing, right? Dressing something. What he may have thought was statues or the Lord, or dressing statues, right? And even though he was doing the exact same thing, he could never get it out of his head that these are like dead matter, and that was the Supreme Lord. Even in that state, he realized that he had touched transcendence. So once we touch transcendence, we can never go back to material life. We cannot enjoy because now we have knowledge. And because we have knowledge, we cannot go back and enjoy the same thing because we're no longer ignorant now. It's like, it's on us now to do the right thing. So Krishna takes away, and this is the nice thing about bhakti, right? It removes the desire for sinful activity, which is so amazing. And Nandasuna Prabhu, you had a question or a comment?
I was just hearing this, I feel, is good for me and probably for others, because I think the tendency is that we see a devotee doing well and then they leave and never come back. At least the tendency for me is to think, oh, that person's just like gone. Like in a material, it's kind of like a material conception. Like they came and did a bunch of devotional service and then they left and they're gone forever. But hearing this is like reminding me that that's not really how it works.
Yes, that's so true. There are some very good examples of Hayagriva Prabhu. You know Hayagriva Prabhu in the beginning days, he was a professor, and then he left devotional service. Towards the end of his life, he had some kind of cancer, I believe, and he was really suffering. And his mother reminded him that go back to Prabhupada. His mother reminded, go back to Prabhupada. And that helped him, connect. The other example was Sudama Vipra Maharaj. He joined in LA, I believe. He was African-American actor, very charismatic. He was a sannyasi. Then after Prabhupada left, he went back to his old life. If you see him in the Prabhupada memories, he looks like he's really out there. But towards the end of his life, when he realized he contracted AIDS, and then he called the devotees. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj tells this story, and then he called him and said, Tamal, you tell me what I should do. You've always been straight with me. So then they arranged for him to come back to the LA temple. He came back, the devotees took care of him, and he left his body in Brahma Muhurta, devotees chanting around him, the garlands of Rukmini Dwarkadish on his body, the prasadam from the deities on his chest. That's how he left his body. So it was not, it seemed like they're out there, but Krishna never forgets. Even one time we say, Krishna, I'm yours, right? When we are chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, even just one time, in all these mantras, which may be just like, we're firing empty bullets, but, Krishna never forgets. So we can be assured that once we have taken this path, we will always come back. It's just a matter of time. So, Purnamrita.
As you were speaking, I was just reflecting that the devotees are just a reflection of Krishna's mercy. How, he left and he just stopped engaging in devotional service, but when he needed it the most, they all were there to chant for him, put prasadam on him and all that. So it's not like you left, so now you're not a part of this, and no, you can't have this anymore. It's just You're
Yes.
always welcoming, and Krishna is like that too.
Yeah, the mercy of the devotees, the mercy of Krishna is unlimited. It's described, right? The mercy of Lord Nityananda is unlimited. It's forever there. Kalindi? You know.
I was thinking, what if we don't know if we committed offense towards devotee or deities or anything, but we are not aware of it. So, what we can do, and what you suggest? Or
So there will be some signs that we have committed an offense or we are not on the right, our consciousness is not proper. The example of Rupa Goswami, he was engaged in worship, but then his meditation broke. So we may have difficulty with our service. We may not have the same taste, or we will see that we're trying our best, but we still make, instead of putting sugar in the sabji, we are putting salt. Or putting salt, we put sugar, or we put, salt in the sweet rice. We are doing our, but then we can, so there are some signs, just like when we get a disease, before that you have some preliminary symptoms, right? We're losing taste, we are not so enthused, not so inspired. It feels like a drag, it feels more like a burden rather than like the opportunity to do service. So these signs are there, but we are not paying attention. Sometimes till the disease becomes really advanced. So that's why we have to be vigilant, and if we are in the association of devotees, they may, if we have good friends, and that's why it's important to have good association and be open to that feedback. They will tell us, I feel even the countenance changes. You see someone like, there's some lack of luster, or it just doesn't look right. When someone is, you can tell, this person just doesn't look right. So if we are vigilant for these signs, then we can start to think, okay, maybe I've committed an offense, so I'm not attentive in my sadhana, and we can fix it. Or if we feel like maybe we have committed an offense to the Vaishnava, then we have to go and ask them as to is it, I feel I have offended you, so I want to apologize, and how can I serve you? So this will help us get back on track. Is that okay? Someone has any other solutions? Oh. Yes, go ahead.
Talking about how devotees kind of being taken away and coming back to devotional service reminded me about how Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, for a practicing sadhaka, when the mind, wherever the mind wanders, gradually bring it back under control. And similarly, when one surrenders to Krishna and he takes control of them, wherever we may wander, he will gradually bring us back under his control. And it reminded me also of a prayer, I think by Jiva or Rupa Goswami, about our Krishna treating us like his cows, and his cow, our mind is drinking the gross, muddy water on the ground, but please guide us back to the fresh waters. I'm very roughly.
It's very nice analogy.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice analogy, practical thing that, there's some more, last one, we are over time. Yeah, we need to stop then, we'll just take it offline. So, alright, Gantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.